Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mom's Corner. I'm Zainab. For those who are regulars on Mom's Corner, thank you for being here. And for those who are joining us for the first time today, thank you for coming. And I hope that you can join us for future sessions. At the end of our session, we will share the link to our stipend as promised. So please make sure the name on your screen reflects the one that we'll be sending it to. And yeah, so take care of that. And if you are not able to do that, I can definitely help you with that on my end. Please do just let me know, message me privately if you would like. A brief introduction about Mom's Corner. Mom's Corner is one of the many programs under the umbrella of Global Perinatal Services, or GPS. And GPS is a nonprofit organization doing amazing work and changing lives every day. Our organization's mission is to provide perinatal support services that include doula services, lactation education, childbirth education, early parenting support, and child development. The communities that we offer those services to are marginalized communities, which include Black immigrant and refugee families. And Mom's Corner, as many of you know, is not just a space for moms, but for all women folk and supporters of women, because at GPS, we believe that womanhood is an extension of women's identity and not the definition. And Mom's Corner, since the pandemic, has become not just a space where we come together to find empathy, support, and camaraderie, but a safe haven and access to so many critical resources in our communities. Just a reminder, we will have Q&A at the end of our session today, but if you have a question or comment, Mr. B, my good friend, is here with us today, which we're so excited about. Please feel free to drop it in the chat box or raise your hand or use the emoji features, whatever you would like. You're welcome to do so. This is a community space. We're all learning together, judgment-free space. So feel free and comfortable to share anything and everything with us today. And again, thank you so much to my friend, Mr. B, for being here. We're so excited to have you back on again. You are, at this point, you're practically part of the GPS family. So whenever I pick up the phone, like, can you come and do this for us? And he's always ready and available. And I really appreciate you for us. And so welcome. And without further ado, hand it over to you.
Of course. Thank you, Sister Zainab. I appreciate you. And thank you, family, for being here. Like Sister Zainab said, we met a few years ago, and she's just such a sweet soul and sincere in her approach to life and supporting individuals. And so when you have a sister like that, you want to join their team. And so I'm blessed to be a part of it. I'm blessed to be here because for me, Black culture, whether you're, African American or you're, Black American from the US, it's our culture. And that's kind of one of the things I remember from last year's discussion was how can, individuals from the African American community, be of support. And, we're all one. At the end of the day, I have, Muslim students, I have Somali students, I have, Eritrean students, I have students from Kenya, all over the place, from Africa. But what my message to them is, when the police or when somebody of authority or, a white male or whatever that has indifference towards you sees you, they're not going to say, oh, you're African American. Oh, okay. I'm going to treat you differently. No, they're going to treat you the same. So it's how are you conducting yourself and how are you representing your family and how are you representing your culture? So that's always my message. We have to be united. And so thank you all for being here for this Juneteenth, celebration of knowledge and information. And so as you can see on the first slide here, we're just going to jump right in. And if you have any questions throughout, like Sister Zainab said, please put them in the chat or raise your hand or, turn your mic on, because I want to make sure that I don't miss any opportunity to share with you. It's not that I'm the expert, but I do love my culture and my, my people, and studying it is important to me. So Juneteenth, honoring freedom and resilience, presented by, Joe Mista Be. So here's our table of contents, right? So we're going to talk about Juneteenth and, what and the why, give a little historical relevance, take a deeper dive into the proclamation, because there's some misconceptions around that, and, journey to recognition, which, in 2021, it became a federalized holiday. And then, ending off with what can we do? How can we honor Juneteenth and the legacy and keep it going and educate everyone. So it's not just one of those formalities, that we just, oh, it's Juneteenth, here's the holiday, or here's a day off, like most people do when it pertains to Black American enslavement, holidays, and such. So that's our table of contents there. So I have a video here that I want to show. It's from TED Ed that kind of gives a historical perspective. So hopefully you can hear the video and see it. We tried it earlier and it was working out. So just let me know if you don't have the sound. Zainab, can you check the chat for me, please, while we get this going?
Yep, I'll keep an eye on it. Yep.
All right. Hopefully you can hear that well.
One day, while hiding in the kitchen, Charlotte Brooks overheard a life-changing secret. At the age of 17, she'd been separated from her family and taken to William Nealon's Texas plantation. There, she was made to do housework at the violent whims of her enslavers. On that fateful day, she learned that slavery had recently been abolished, but Nealon conspired to keep this a secret from those he enslaved. Hearing this, Brooks stepped out of her hiding spot, proclaimed her freedom, spread the news throughout the plantation, and ran. That night, she returned for her daughter, Tempe, and before Nealon's spiteful bullets could find them, they were gone for good. For more than 2 centuries, slavery defined what would become the United States, from its past as the 13 British colonies to its growth as an independent country. Slavery fueled its cotton industry and made it a leading economic power. 10 of the first 12 presidents enslaved people. And when U.S. chattel slavery finally ended, it was a long and uneven process. Enslaved people resisted from the beginning by escaping, breaking tools, staging rebellions, and more. During the American Revolution, Vermont and Massachusetts abolished slavery, while several states took steps towards gradual abolition. In 1808, federal law banned the import of enslaved African people, but it allowed the slave trade to continue domestically. Approximately 4 million people were enslaved in the U.S. when Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860. Lincoln opposed slavery, and though he had no plans to outlaw it, his election caused panic in southern states, which began withdrawing from the Union. They vowed to uphold slavery and formed the Confederacy, triggering the start of the American Civil War. A year into the conflict, Lincoln abolished slavery in Washington, D.C., legally freeing more than 3,000 people. And 5 months later, he announced the Emancipation Proclamation. It promised freedom to the 3.5 million people enslaved in Confederate states. But it would only be fulfilled if the rebelling states didn't rejoin the Union by January 1st, 1863. And it bore no mention of the roughly 500,000 people in bondage in the border states of Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri that hadn't seceded. When the Confederacy refused to surrender, Union soldiers began announcing emancipation. But many southern areas remained under Confederate control, making it impossible to actually implement abolition throughout the South. The war raged on for 2 more years, and on January 31st, 1865, Congress passed the 13th Amendment. It promised to end slavery throughout the U.S., except as punishment for a crime. But to go into effect, 27 states would have to ratify it first. Meanwhile, the Civil War virtually ended with the surrender of Confederate General Robert E. Lee on April 9th, 1865. But although slavery was technically illegal in all southern states, it still persisted in the last bastions of the Confederacy. There, enslavers like Nealon continued to evade abolition until forced. This was also the case when Union General Gordon Granger marched his troops into Galveston, Texas on June 19th and announced that all enslaved people there were officially free and had been for more than 2 years. Still, at this point, people remained legally enslaved in the border states. It wasn't until more than 5 months later, on December 6th, 1865, that the 13th Amendment was finally ratified. This formally ended chattel slavery in the U.S. Because official emancipation was a staggered process, people in different places commemorated it on different dates. Those in Galveston, Texas, began celebrating Juneteenth, a combination of June and 19th, on the very first anniversary of General Granger's announcement. Over time, smaller Juneteenth gatherings gave way to large parades, and the tradition eventually became the most widespread of emancipation celebrations. But while chattel slavery had officially ended, racial inequality, oppression, and terror had not. Celebrating emancipation was itself an act of continued resistance, and it wasn't until 2021 that Juneteenth became a federal holiday. Today, Juneteenth holds profound significance as a celebration of the demise of slavery, the righteous pursuit of true freedom for all, and a continued pledge to remember the past and dream the future. People resisted slavery in the U.S. as long as it persisted. Uncover the story of those who escaped slavery and created a secret society in the Great Dismal Swamp with this video. Or learn about the incredible courage of Harriet Tubman with this video.
All right. Hmm. So that was a brief history of how Juneteenth came to be. And the irony of that to me, from that video was that, they said President Lincoln did not oppose. He was neither for it or against it. He was more so for maintaining, the Union in the United States, because there were 500,000 plus enslaved persons in those states like Missouri, Kentucky, in the middle ground states that were still enslaved well beyond, the 1865, well into December of 1865. And so it came 2.5 years later, after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, officially freeing, enslaved people. But that was only for the southern states that were seceding from the Union. So he had no plan to, truly abolish slavery. But his pressure came from, wanting to not go to war and have, the South fight the North. So Juneteenth was born out of jubilation and joy and happiness for what the enslaved people at the time thought was their freedom call. And I say what they thought at the time because, you heard them talk about the 13th Amendment. There was a clause in there that's still in there, no slavery except for a crime that has been committed. And so once they were free, the Southerners in the South did not want to relinquish that power because they were so fearful of, the unity that the enslaved persons had, that they didn't want to be overrun. And so, I don't want to go on a tangent. I could just go so deep into that, but nonetheless, in some parts they call it Freedom Day, Emancipation Day. But Juneteenth is the official known name because in Galveston, Texas, where it originated, that's what they started to call it. So that gave a little bit of history as to the formation of it and how it was established. So I want to ask the question here to, for somebody to come onto the microphone or type into the chat. But given what you understand now and maybe what you've already come to know, why do you think it took 2.5 years for the order to be sent to Texas? Talked about it a little bit in the video, but what do you think the reasoning was for it to take that long for a message to get sent to parts of the South? Who has an idea? You can either turn on your mic or type it in the chat. It's okay. If no one has an idea. I mean, when we think about it, right? If we think about the reason why, economics, right? Because the South, in parts of Texas and other parts of Louisiana and Mississippi, where there was a Confederate still a Confederate line, they did not want to relinquish, the crops. Like it was crop season and they wanted the enslaved persons to still continue to farm and get that last little bit of labor out of them before they had to relinquish them because they felt they would be overrun. Is that somebody on the mic? Yes? No? Okay. All right. So that's the reason why, like, they just wanted to hold on to it for as long as they could, without relinquishing, that power that they had over the enslaved people at that time. So that's why it took so long. Some people might argue that it took long because they had to travel that way. But even then, they had ways to send messages kind of quickly. So, oh, something is in the chat. I'm sorry, excuse me. Oh, yeah, that's so messed up. It is, in fact, it is definitely messed up. And yeah. All right. Thank you for that comment, Fudama. So the historical relevance. So it was a long time coming. Emancipation Proclamation was issued by Abraham Lincoln on January 1st of 1863. And even after the proclamation, slavery was still active in parts of Texas and parts of the South. The birth of the 13th Amendment was to completely abolish slavery in the entire United States. And you guys may know that there was slavery, all over the world, right? Unfortunately, in Great Britain, and of course in parts of South America, in Brazil, in Haiti, right? But they officially abolished slavery long before America did, because America wanted to continue that train of that economics, right? Because the enslaved people, it's free labor, right? So they wanted to continue to do that. But in certain parts of the country, in the North, in certain cities, slavery was officially abolished prior to the Emancipation Proclamation, but it was mostly in the South where they just refused to relinquish it. So the Emancipation Proclamation was issued prior to the war, really starting, where Abraham Lincoln just simply wanted to keep the United States together. But it was on that condition of, you free your slaves and join the Union. But the South did not want to do that. So Freedom Day established a tradition known as Jubilee Day on June 19th, 1866 in Galveston, Texas. And it officially became a state holiday in 1979. So Texas was the first state to actually make it a state holiday. And there were other states that opposed. If you guys didn't know that, that's crazy, right? Like, they did not want Jubilee Day or Emancipation Day or Freedom Day to be a part of their state's, holidays. But Texas was the first state to actually say, you know what, we are going to call this a state holiday, and it's going to be on this date where, you don't go to work and you have time off and all those other things that came along with it. But for me, it came to be in 2021 officially with President Joe Biden. And I have my statement about that I'll ask after the question. So June 19th, 2021, Congress passed a bill making it a federal holiday, which means across the United States, regardless of if you, don't like it or not, it's a day off. It is a federally recognized holiday that's on the books, which means you don't go to work if you work for the federal government or if you're a state employee. Now, my question is this a holiday? Is this holiday a federal holiday because of what took place in the summer of 2020? If those events didn't take place, would Juneteenth be a nationally recognized holiday? So that's a question that I have for you all out there, because we all know what happened in the summer of 2020. Let's see, we got some comments in here. Yep, Texas was the first state. The North also benefited from the economic engine of slavery through cotton. Yes, of course it did. Yes, the entire United States. That's a great, oh, that's Zainab. Okay, that's you, Zainab. Yes, they in fact did benefit because they had textile mills in the North, right? So the cotton came from the South to the North because that's where all the clothing factories were, like all the big textiles, and they sent it over to Europe, and Europe sent them money and trade and all this kind of stuff. But the engine that drove the whole thing was the cotton from the South. Great comment, sister. Yes, I believe it was because of 2020. Yes. So what happened in 2020? What was the big stir in 2020? Who can just put it in the chat or turn their microphone on to remind us of what took place in 2020 that caused this whole commotion around the world? Who remembers? No one?
George Floyd.
Yes, Sister Zainab, thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, someone wrote that.
Yes, thank you, Taylor. The unfortunate murder of George Floyd. Thank you, Ifra. That is very true, right? So we had that scenario take place that kind of just put the world in a tizzy, because we literally had a public lynching on, I mean, there's been plenty of those, but that was the one that kind of set the world ablaze, right? It happened in 2020. And my belief, because President Joe Biden, if you guys remember, he was a part of Clinton's cabinet in the 90s when President Bill Clinton was, the president of the United States. And so he came up with the bill, the crime bill, the universal crime bill was what Joe Biden actually wrote into law that put 3 strikes into action. So, and it mostly impacted, statistically, it says the data mostly impacted Black American men and Latino males, right? So my understanding is that he felt a sense of pressure to say, okay, hey, Black community, I did something for you guys, right? Like, that's just my opinion, because the bill that he wrote into law put so many Black American men in prison, right? Too many of our men were swept off the street because of that bill, right? In the name of survival. So, yes. So I think it was definitely because of what happened. They wanted to give us something and be like, see, we're not racist. Exactly, Ifra. That is exactly my sentiment as well. That they wanted to present something that says, okay, hey, now you guys actually have a federally recognized holiday. But to me, that should have never taken place in that regard. It should have been a long time ago, like in 1979, right? Like when Texas made it a state holiday for themselves, the country should have done so as well. But because of what happened with George Floyd and, the guilt that Joe Biden perhaps felt, that is probably why he, finalized the bill. But that's just my, conspiracy theorist, Black man mind speaking.
No, I want to jump in there. No, I don't. I want to say that you're not alone in that sentiment, because as you and I and everyone knows, politicians are always out for themselves. So whatever they do, there's always some kind of interest, serving themselves. So,
Sure.
I mean, I wouldn't put that past him, because a lot of times policies are made to make people look good, is to stay in office or get reelected. Oh, see, I did this for the Black people. And he probably got a lot of pressure from the Black community too. So he wouldn't have
for sure.
on his own. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's very true. That's very true. Thank you for that participation. Thank you, sis, as always. Okay, next slide here. So emancipation, a deeper dive into the proclamation. So for what we know about emancipation, the term is basically to set free or to provide a sense of freedom. When you're emancipated, you're set free, right? So the Emancipation Proclamation was issued by Abraham Lincoln on January 1st of 1863. And it proclaimed that all enslaved people in the states currently engaged in rebellion against the Union. So that's generally all the southern states like Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, West Virginia, North Carolina, all the states that seceded from the Union, that were a part of the Union Army. It was only those enslaved persons. So the enslaved persons that were in, Kentucky, Missouri, Tennessee, all those states that were like battleground, what we call, even states, that did not include them. And it says, shall be thenceforward and forevermore free. So that in itself is like a contradiction, right? Because it's only those enslaved persons that were in the southern states where the armies were. And so I always found that interesting, because I was like, what happened to the other close to 600,000 enslaved people in those other states, right? So In December of 1865, the 13th Amendment was ratified, which completely abolished slavery. So saying that from that day forward, the 13th Amendment, there will be no more enslaved persons, no more freedom to have slaves, no more. It's that in itself is just stirring to me, that they actually had to have a amendment to the Constitution of the United States that says we don't want to enslave anybody anymore. But as the video stated, 12 of the first 16 presidents owned people. Little tidbit of information off the top of my head. How many of you know how many enslaved people George Washington actually had? George Washington, the first president of the United States. Who wants to put a stab out there in the chat? Just throw out a number. How many do you think enslaved persons did?
100 plus.
100 plus. Okay, let's just end it right here and call it 300. I think it was like 325, 327 enslaved people he owned across plantations. And then everybody's favorite, Thomas Jefferson, he had even more because he inherited from his wife's father, right? And these are like the founding fathers of our country that actually owned, yeah, huh? Exactly. Actually owned that many people. So neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So that's basically the clause in the 13th Amendment. But that's where they kind of like, they held former enslaved people, Black American people, down because it says except for punishment for a crime. So whatever simple crime they could think of, you could just be vagrant, right? Which means, you don't have a job. Of course you don't have a job because you were enslaved for your whole life. So you don't have a job. And now you're trying to do things to establish a foundation for yourself. And you're out on the street looking for a job, asking people, can you help them work? And they arrest you for being vagrant. Seriously. You guys would be amazed by the documents of, the arrest records for during that time, 1867, 8, 9, during the Reconstruction period, right? During that time of life for former enslaved people, just the arrest records that were put on our Black people, it would make your stomach turn. So let's see, there's something else in the chat here. Yeah, a necessary evil, huh? Okay, yep, I agree. So the question is, what are your thoughts on the intentions of the Emancipation Proclamation? Do you have any thoughts about it? Like, for me, the intentions were to, I think it was just intended to just for Abraham Lincoln, just to say, he did something. Like he felt he was under so much pressure to, appease the people of the South. So he put this proclamation into place. Because for those of you who may not know the history of Abraham Lincoln, he wasn't all like everybody cracks him up to be. Because his actual words were like, hey, I don't care, Black people are less than white people. Like, he would say stuff like that. Like, he actually, had an agreement with Frederick Douglass, who I thought was the first Black president of the United States, to actually send the former enslaved people to parts of Africa. So, yeah. Any comments on that? Any comments on the Emancipation Proclamation and, the 13th Amendment in particular? Because that's still prevalent today for our Black people, the 13th Amendment.
The language kind of echoes a lot of the policies our government, institute, and kind of you always have to read the fine print because there's always, like, this is what we want people. They try to appeal to all sides and kind of play it safe until they know Like they know what they want to do in their minds, but for all of us looking in from the outside, it's, oh, at least they're doing something, you know, this is, but at the end of the day, it's self-serving as always. Mhm.
Oh, for sure. So true. Thank you, sis.
Mhm.
All right. So the journey to recognition, why did it take so long? That's a great question. So approximately 42 years from 1979 to 2021. Now, in between, there were, you know, a couple states that were trying to get things passed to recognize, you know, Jubilee Day, Freedom Day, Juneteenth, but legislation just continued to shoot it down. But it was 42 years from the time Texas state enacted it to 2021. So Texas was the only state on record that held Juneteenth as a state holiday. Now more than 28 states recognize Juneteenth as a state holiday. But as of June 19th, 2021, all 50 states obviously have to recognize it now because it has become federalized. But not all states allow for it to be a paid holiday. Because the reality is, you know, we are in a capitalistic society, right? And if states recognize it where they say, okay, this is a federalized holiday where you're going to get paid for not working, they're losing money. They don't want to do that. So although the government says, hey, states, you know what? This is a federalized holiday. So state employees, government employees, you are officially off. Not every company that, you know, there's a lot of companies, let's say Microsoft, for example, that doesn't recognize that. Like, you still have to go to work, you know? They don't, it's a state holiday. It's a federalized holiday. But if you work for an independent company, they're not taking time to recognize that, right? And so it's just the irony of it all, like the purpose. So it was first introduced for a resolution in 1994. Like I mentioned earlier, Bill Clinton and Joe Biden himself were in office at that time. And they just kept, denying. And it was finally passed in June of 2021 after all of the uproar. As always, the U.S. putting profits ahead of people. Yes, that is very true, Sister Zainab. Yes, very good. Thank you. So certain states observed it as a state holiday in a certain year. So basically, there were certain states that said, okay, you know what, we're going to participate because there's so much, heat around it. But again, it officially became recognized in June of 2021 after all of the, the world basically went to poop, around George Floyd. And I'm thinking all of those years before, what was going on? Why wasn't it being recognized all those years before? What happened in 1994 where it made it all the way up to the president's door, but he shut it for whatever reason. So the question for this segment is, even though it was written into law as a federal holiday, do you think it will ever truly be recognized by all states? Why or why not? Like truly recognized, because yes, all states, because it's federally, issued, but what I'm talking about shutting down, like nothing's open, there's nothing but parties going on, like July 4th, right? Like, will it be recognized like a July 4th? Do we think? I personally don't think so. Because there's such a dichotomy, family, in the Black community itself, because there's so much ignorance in the Black community, right? And I say that with a profound sense of like truth. There is ignorance in our community, in the Black American community, especially, right? Because they have no idea about their history and they never want to really dive in. Because when you think about it, like, it's funny, and I'll just have a side note to this, because my students were like, I had one of my little Somali boys and a Latino boy, they were being joking about, they were being facetious, like just being comical. And so the Latino boy said, hey, Mr. B, what do Black people do? Right? That was his question, because he said, well, Asians, they have their own shops, and, they do hair and makeup and, nails, and, Mexicans, we do construction and yard work, right? And white people, they own everything. And he was like, what do Black people do? And I kind of chuckled and I said, man, we are the world's entertainers, bro. Like, we entertain you. Like, we got hip hop on lock. We got the fashion industry on lock. We got the sports on lock, right? And they were all like, oh man, I never really thought it. And I was like, bro, I'm just kidding. Like, Black people do everything. We're everywhere. You know what I'm saying? We were the originators of everything, right? But that's the youth mindset. And that's why I say there's so much ignorance in our communities, because they've pigeonholed us to this idea of that's all we're good for, to entertain you, right? Not to educate you, not to work on you because I'm a doctor, not to, fight for your rights because I'm a lawyer, but to entertain you, right? That makes me sick. But there's such a dichotomy in the Black community, because like some people really, like, of course, in Galveston, Texas, right? In parts of Texas, there's going to be a big celebration, on what is that, next Tuesday or next Wednesday, right? The city's going to shut down. But in the other parts of the United States, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, I mean, you might have a pop-up here and there, but it's not like it's going to shut downtown Seattle down, right? Because people in our community are just going to carry on like it's a normal day, and not really reflecting on what that really means, what that really meant for individuals, my ancestors, our ancestors of that time. No idea. Let me check the chat real quick. Maybe one day. Thank you for Duma. Yeah, I think it definitely will, because this new generation won't give up applying pressure. Okay, Ifra, I love that. I love that enthusiasm for hope. Yes. And you know what? When you say the next generation won't quit applying pressure, but how are they going to learn about that? Because it's not being taught in school. I could tell you that for sure, right? It's not being taught. Maybe when we have forums like this and we invite our babies to come and sit, right? And they're getting this education this way, something will quicken in them. But as an educator in our public school system, I can definitely tell you that this is not being talked about in our social studies and histories classes, period. And that's where the true travesty is with our school systems. So let's see, one more comment in the chat. We need more spaces like this, and also educating our children yes, sadly, yes, that is very true, right? We definitely need more spaces like this. But thanks to GPS, we have it. Okay, let's move on. I appreciate you guys with the comments in the chat. Oh yeah, there's plenty of white men teaching history, I mean, okay, I don't want to get sidetracked, but that is very true. That is very true, unfortunately, who have no idea. All right. So our last slide here is ways to honor the legacy of Juneteenth. So it starts by simply being here in spaces like this, educating yourself, right? Participating in forums, just to ask questions, right? Because that's how you honor the legacy. That's how you keep that fire going for our next generation, to, keep the pressure up, because they are educated. And when you're educated, you're learned and you care now. Because if you're ignorant, and I don't say ignorant, ignorance is not a bad word. People might use it as a negative connotation, but it just means you don't know. And so when you're ignorant, how do you not become ignorant? You learn and you ask questions and you become aware. So that's how you keep the legacy going, because now that you have this information, you're going to be like, oh man, I just had a great presentation on Juneteenth. Guess what? Let's see what we can do about it in our community to spread it a little further, right? Let's see what the comments are in the chat. Home. Yes, home. Okay, got it. And whitewashing everything. Yes, they are. Yes, they are definitely doing that. That is crazy. Another way to honor the legacy is to amplify Black voices. And so that's always been a struggle for me, because I know there's great institutions that do that. But unfortunately, right, because like I said earlier, when I was giving the anecdote about my students, entertainers, right? Like for me, I challenge all of the hip hop artists. But when you think about the hip hop artists, they're, you know, modern day slaves as well, right? Because they don't own anything. Who's owning a record company? Jay-Z is the first billionaire rapper, but does he have his own record company? Right? Is it like Jay and Beyonce Records? No, it's not Sony. It's not who, whatever other, labeler there is. He still has to answer to somebody, right? And that's the thing. We don't own anything. And so when we talk about amplifying Black voices, it only goes so far with our authors and our, individuals that are in the industry that could mainstream movie makers, because again, that stuff has to be vetted. I create videos, right, with my music, and YouTube has shut them down saying they're violent, but all of my pictures come from the internet. It's not like I'm actually brutalizing a Black person's body. I'm actually just putting pictures up there, but they say your video can't be showed because of graphic content. And I'm just like, bro, I pulled these pictures from the internet, right? So when you talk about amplifying Black voices, they're quick to shut down the truth. But that's another way to honor the legacy of Juneteenth, is by amplifying those voices that want to speak, such as myself and such as Sister Zainab and everybody else in the community that is not afraid to speak the truth about the legacy of Juneteenth and slavery in general. All right, let's see.
Just add
Yeah, go ahead.
on that. I have some comments about this. So first, the question about why, a lot of states, some people think, might not recognize it as a federal holiday. I feel like if they do, that's recognizing,
Yep.
part of the ugly history that this actually happened, breathing it into existence kind of thing. You're actually saying, oh, it did happen. We acknowledge that, and we're doing this day, in honor of that. And the student's question, you said there was a dichotomy, and just to your point, you don't have, yes, there are a lot of Black entertainers. Yes, they're making all this impact, but what are they tangible? Like, can we feel it? Is it making progress for Black people? Is it making, like, what is it leaving an indelible mark on history? Like, is it bettering the condition of Black people? How are we seeing that? And the student's question is legitimate. Like, we see other communities making these impacts and making these changes in their communities, but Black people, we're stuck there. Like you said, like Malcolm was speaking, like, why can't we be in charge of our own, economy, of our own progress? So just makes you think a lot.
Definitely. Thank you for adding that, Sister Zainab. And to that segue there, support Black owned businesses, right? And for me, right, it goes back to, like, if you just type in the Reconstruction period from 1865 to 1877, that was probably the most explosive time period for Black Americans, but also explosive in a sense of violent. There were more lynchings during that time than at any other period of the enslavement period. After, I mean, there was a lot of lynchings, right? But during that time, there were a lot of unnecessary killings of Black Americans, former enslaved people, because of the power of unity. And so when you think about, like, Black owned, right, businesses and shops, right, there's a lot of quality products, but they have to compete with the fact that, and I say the products were stolen or falsely appropriated by, dominant culture, and they have to compete with that, right? Because it's like, oh, well, this has been proven to be a quality product versus, this product that, as for centuries has worked in Africa and is proven to be something beneficial to your life as a whole. It has to be competed with. And I often go back to, FUBU, many of you might remember the clothing brand FUBU that stood for us by us, where it was a thriving clothing brand in the early 90s into the 2000s, but it was sold out for money to an Italian designer who really flipped it and it became something even greater. And I was thinking, what if he could have held on to his business? At the time, he sold it for $50 million, right? And so I was like, what if he would have held on to that and branched out and partnered with Nike or Adidas or these other companies that have already been established with themselves, like Jordan Brand or whatever, just thinking like, what would have happened if he would have done that? And so it's unfortunate that, yes, a way to honor the legacy is to continue to support Black-owned businesses, but where are they? And are they being promoted properly? Let's see what's in the chat. Yes, we are stronger together than we are apart, for sure. Certainly. I wish we could all, take ownership of that. And another way is to advocate for change, like Ifra put in the comments about, the next generation, right? Encouraging our young Black people of African descent and African-American descent to, be an advocate, stand up for what's right. Let's have that revival of the 2020 with George Floyd, because I often talk to my students about like, what does police reform look like to you? What do you care about police reform, right? So also engage in dialogue. Don't be afraid to have these conversations, right? So it goes back to you're not apprehensive to have a dialogue because you're informed, right? And the only way that we fail to engage in dialogue is we feel we don't know. So it goes back to the very first bullet, educate yourself. Now you can be informed and have a thoughtful conversation with someone, not an argument. There's nothing to argue, right? Like Sister Zainab said, like when the states recognize, they're acknowledging it. It happened. It's not like we can't, oh, that didn't happen. That's just a facade. It actually took place, right? It actually took place. So it's not an argument. It's just like, let's open this up for some conversation. What do you think? And then lastly, just acknowledge it and spread the word. Like, hey, man, Juneteenth is coming up. What do you got going on? What do you know about it? Do you know anything about it? Oh, well, check out GPS. They have a great, recorded video about Juneteenth. There you go. Google it, right? So those are just a few of the many ways that we can honor the legacy of Juneteenth and keep it going. So my last question, before I play my song for you guys, if we have time for that, Zainab?
Oh, yeah, we got time.
Okay, perfect. So what can you commit to that will bring awareness to why Juneteenth is an important day to observe? Or is it an important day, right? Is it just another day? Is it something that we should just be like, oh, yay, we got a day off? Or it should be like, man, we got a day off because it's about time, right? And let's keep digging and let's keep, putting pressure, as Sister Ifra said. So I'm open for questions. I'm open for comments. Let me see. I think that's, yes. So, if you have any questions, comments, wonderings, concerns, please feel free to put them in the chat or voice them here, because I would love to have a dialogue with you. But I don't know if Sister Zainab told you guys, I'm not a rapper, right? I'm not, none of these guys out here, Drake or whoever else, all the rappers. I couldn't think of anybody because I don't listen to rap, right? It's not edifying me. It's not building me up. But I do write raps to relate to my kids, and I always write a rap for Black History Month. But this month, I don't know if I didn't have the motivation or if I didn't have the time, but I usually put out a rap where I, post pictures with my song. But I wrote this rap, and it's called Savages, because they actually called, Black Americans, enslaved, Africans, savages, right? And so I wrote this song that kind of dedicates, okay, Ifra says that's where the African diaspora wars come from. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Amen, Faduma. Oh, no? Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. Or maybe not. I don't know. So I'm going to figure out like if I can play my song so you guys can hear it. So I'll just leave that there and bring this down. So okay. So I'm just going to leave this big mess on my screen. And you guys let me know if you can hear my song. Hopefully you can. Volume's all the way up. All right.
Yo, it's your boy, Mr. B, man, and I'm back at you once again. Because as long as I got breath in my body, yo, I'm not gonna ever let you forget the atrocities that took place in this country. You feel me? As we celebrate Juneteenth, I want to put a little something on your mind, man. That can you believe they actually called us savages? Yo, y'all vibe with me on this. Savages, right? Yeah, they got it. In chains, they drag my people away. Beaten, bloody, and broken day by day. The middle passage, a hellish void to despair. Family shattered, lives destroyed. No one cared. Savagery under the guise of states' rights. Torture, rape, and murder in the name of right. The crack of the whip, the sting of the lash. The screams that mothers wails forever echoed in the past. They tried to break our spirits like we wasn't going last. But like a phoenix, we still rising out the ash. From ash to ash and dust to dust. The record is yet to come from the trauma cost of us. Yeah, we can't escape it. We shouldn't ignore it. In the recess of our mind, we shouldn't store it. We gotta face the music, don't run from the facts. Trying to erase our history, how savage is that? Yeah, you call us savages, but really though, you call us savages, but let the record truly show. Terrorize the red, you terrorize the black, you terrorize the yellow. Now how savage is that? Yeah, you call us savages, but really though, you call us savages, but let the record truly show. You terrorize the red, you terrorize the black, you terrorize the yellow. Now how savage is that? Yeah, put it in burning crosses, midnight terror rage. KKK domestic terror, families of the freed. Jim Crow, chokehold, segregation game. Separate but equal, a lie, perpetual shame. We follow rights, lost for justice, yet we still survive. Systemic change persists that intended to deprive our people of their basic unalienable needs. Like the wolves in sheep's clothes, they have planted some seeds. Mass incarceration took my brothers away from home. Now my sisters are left to raise their kids alone. Those who are protected serve, they never lie. They keep their knee on their neck. They choke until we die. We can't escape it. We shouldn't ignore it. In the recess of our mind, we shouldn't store it. We gotta face the music. Don't run from the facts. Trying to erase our history, how savage is that? Yeah, you call us savages, but really though, you call us savages, but let the record truly show. You terrorize the red, you terrorize the black, you terrorize the yellow. Now how savage is that? Yeah, you call us savages, but really though, you call us savages, but let the record truly show. You terrorize the red, you terrorize the black, you terrorize the yellow. Now how savage is that? Yeah.
All right. So that was my song.
Oh
Called
my
Savages.
goodness, that was amazing.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you so
Did you share that publicly yet? Because if it hasn't gone viral, then something must be wrong with the internet. Something must be wrong with the internet if that didn't go viral. Oh my goodness, that was
No, thank you for doing. No, I haven't. I'm still working on a video. I was debating if I should even put pictures in to kind of, describe what I'm saying, because of the trauma that that type of stuff causes.
Yeah.
But it's the truth, right? Like, so because I love my history so much, it forced me to think about like how the original, savagery was caused to the Native American, right? The red man, right? And so that's why I say it, because red, black, yellow, right? Like you think of like they savaged everybody, right? Like it was crazy,
Yeah.
when you think about it. But because it's, Black American, like the enslavement period, it it doesn't negate what took place to the red man. It doesn't negate what took place to the yellow man. But of those individuals, right? Like, they gave sovereignty to the red man, the Native American, right? So there's opportunities for them in certain parts, for them to have, you know, their casinos and, you know, different ways to function. But that's still a terrible, terrible, terrible story, because it's almost genocide, right? And you think about the yellow man with, you know, the internment camps for the Japanese, and the Chinese being banned from the country, and then what they did to the Vietnamese in Vietnam, and, you know, how, but the government issued so much, like, for the Japanese internment period, for those families that were Japanese Americans that were forced into camps during, you know, World War II. They gave each of those families $200,000 per family, right? So when you talk about reparations, right, like, where's the reparations? Where is the justice for what took place to the Black man and what's still happening to the Black man, right? And so, like, I wrote that song because that's like how I felt. Like, you called us savages, but you're the true savage, you know, the government. But anyway, all right, sister, that's, you know, I'm getting fired. It's time to go. So.
Yes, I can feel the passion. Yeah, it's just, yeah, my goodness. Yeah.
So,
thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Of course. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for
Thank you
being
for keeping it clean, because it's actually a rap I can share with my son.
Of course. I don't,
Yes.
no, nothing profane with me. It's all like, because I think every word that's spoken has to be spoken with clarity and truth. And if you're using profanity, like, my dad told me when I was a little boy, if you cussing, your brain is small.
Yeah.
So I don't believe in using words that don't strike you. I could cuss all day long.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if I'm not using impactful, powerful vocabulary, then I'm no better than anybody else.
No.
So,
No.
yeah. So thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, sis. And again, yeah, if there's any questions, please. But I know, you know, we're near that hour's in. So I had a great time. I hope you guys did too.
Yes, we did. Oh, yes, we did. Thank you. Ifrah was saying, we didn't answer her question. I want to go back.
Yeah, okay, please. Let me see. Where's the question? My question is, how do you navigate those conversations that shift to African diaspora wars and your ancestors weren't even enslaved? I see. Okay. That is a very good question. And I think the foundation for that, because a lot of times, you know, that is something that's brought up. Well, you know, your people in Africa enslaved, you know, their own people, right? And what I've come to understand about that was that enslavement of, you know, the brothers or sisters, if you will, wasn't on the same level as, you know, what we saw in America, right? So when you say, well, your people weren't even enslaved, we all were enslaved, right? Because the ignorance of the chiefsmen in certain parts of West Africa, because the white man came over with all of their, you know, vain materials that the, you know, Black man had never seen before. And they were like, okay, we'll trade. And so it was like the chiefs there were trading, you know, their enemies, if you will, unbeknownst. And so that's just something, like, it's territory. It's such a big question. Like, it's so broad to answer. But I think the foundation is that it's boiled down to people in West Africa, the chiefs, not truly being aware of what they were doing, because these are people that, you know, they went to war with and they were fighting with over territory and things like that. And it was just like commonplace for years, centuries. But, you know, once the white man felt like, you know, the Black enslaved, the Black Africans were suitable for enslavement, it just kind of, the bottom fell out. And that's when you had people being literally stolen from their homeland. And so it's a unique question to answer, because it goes back to what I said at the very beginning. Like, this impacted us all. The resources in Africa are still being outsourced if you guys didn't know, there's parts, I mean, you might know, there's parts of Kenya, there's parts of like different parts of Africa that China has leased on the sole purpose of their resources. And so Africa is still to this day being depleted of its resources. And so like, what are we what are we saying about that? Not too many people are aware of that. And so this is an uphill battle to fight, but we have to keep fighting.
Can I just the last part of Ifrah's question, your ancestors weren't even enslaved. I wonder if that's talking to because many African Americans feel like, you know, we're not, you know, we're not part of the, we're not Black. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't understand what they're up against. Like, we don't understand the problems that they face. So, you know, why do you care about Juneteenth? Or what do you know about being Black in America? So I wonder if that's like a question, a part that you can speak to as well. Because I myself feel that way sometimes. It's like, you don't know nothing about our community, like, you know.
Yeah, and that's what I talked about, like the dichotomy in the Black community itself, right? Because when you think about like, you have, because it started way back in the field house and the slave house.
Yes.
Right? There was a separation. Their whole intention was to separate. They did it on the boat.
Mentality.
On the way. You know? And that's just been their reality for Black America. And so it happens in our communities where it's like, oh, you educated, you ain't hood. You know what I'm saying? You don't understand the game. You know what I mean? Like me personally, I was called an Oreo. I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, and they called me an Oreo because I wanted to learn how to read, and I didn't talk the way they spoke. So they would call me Black on the outside, white on the inside. They would call me white boy, right? These are things that I grew up in the city, you know, but because I wanted to educate myself. So it's been this way where they wanted to keep us separated. And so when you think about like Black Americans versus African Americans, right? There's still that struggle for unity because what do you really know, right? That's the mindset. What do you really know? Like as a Black American, what do you really know? You know, so instead of saying, you know, like you're not like us, let's say, how can we partner together to be unified, right? And that's the reality that, you know, it takes a space like this for all of us to come together and say it's later for that. It's later for that foolishness because we're still enslaved in our minds. If we can't see that Sister Zainab and I and everyone else in this room look alike, right? That the blood that's forced, you know, flowing through our veins. I don't have green blood when I get shot. I have red blood. When Zainab gives blood, her blood is red too, right? But they don't see that. They want to keep us separated in our minds first because of ignorance. And then that's what causes the friction in our communities for people to say, well, you won't ever really understand because, you know, but okay, help me understand then, right? Get me to a place where we're literally becoming one, you know, and it's just unfortunate. And will we ever get there? I pray that we will, with our babies, with our little people, right? Teaching them to love each other, right? To take hold of what's being taught at home, but also be unified, you know? And I think that's the biggest thing where we can get rid of that mindset is just that we, at every turn, forums like this, we have to stay unified.
That's right. And that separation is working. For Black people, there's not a lot of, what policies do you know that we've, you know, put in place that are, there's still a lot of mass incarceration. There's still, you know, economic disparities happening. And we had the first Black president a few years ago, but what huge accomplishments has he really made for Black people? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a very interesting, you know, perspective and point, you know. And it's just unfortunate because it's the roots of the formation of our country run so deep, even when we try to dig up, such as giving Juneteenth a federalized holiday, it's still so much deeper than that. Even when states come together to say, you know, we're going to put, you know, monuments and we're going to put museums and we're going to put, you know, information out about the enslavement period, it's still that national reckoning that, like I said in my rap, the reckoning has yet to come, right? Just to recognize that. And we can't say, well, we're going to wait for all the white people to die, because it's still being taught to them.
Yep.
The N word is so prevalent in
Mm.
society. It's like, and that's why I blame these rappers, because like they're putting it out there like, oh, we're reclaiming power. No, you keeping it alive, you ignorant like individual. You're keeping what their intentionality was alive.
Yep.
So
yes, I was going to ask you about the N word actually, because I talk to my boys and they have friends who say the N word, like, and just what that means. I told them like that's white people that first said that to black people, and that's them, like you said, reclaiming their power by saying to each other. So what do you think about black people saying the N word to each other?
I've hated it when I was a little boy growing up, because I've always been a lover of my history, a lover of my people, a lover of where I come from, and when they spew that word out, whether it's GA or whatever other way we try to jazz it up, you're still keeping the enslaved period and the atrocities and the trauma alive when you spew that word out to each other. Because it's like, I always use the example of, and I'll just say the N word in this context. I never say the N word, but if it's like, yo, what's up, my nigga? I love you, brother. Right? Like, and then I'm gonna whoop that nigga, like, how is that? How are you got blessings and curses coming out of your mouth? Like, I can't love you with that word and then say I'm gonna stomp you out with that word as well. Right? That's just how ignorant we are when it comes to that. And they say, well, I'm reclaiming my power, right? The white man can't put me down because I'm constantly using, I've modernized that word. And it's like, no, you haven't. You've kept it alive. Every time that word is spewed, I just think about the ancestors that were hung from a tree, literally lynched by tens of thousands of white onlookers, spewing that word at them. But we spew it at each other in the name of love and hate. How is that happening? It's because of ignorance, and nobody's really taking time and effort to speak to it, to say, yo, every time I hear somebody at my school say that, I'm like, yo, I'm about to give you a history lesson. I don't want to hear you say that, and here's why. And so I think if the more we did that, but again, that's why I don't like rappers, because every other word is that word, and they're not really, teaching the youth, empowering the youth. They're just, living their life.
Making money.
Exactly.
Yes. Oh, could talk about this forever.
Exactly.
I don't see any more questions, but oh my goodness, our chat, has never been on fire like this. So testament to your presentation. So thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah. And once your video is out, please let us know. I want to share it. Yeah. With our colleagues as well. Yeah.
For sure.
Any last minute questions or comments, guys? You've been so awesome with your questions and comments, by the way. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Certainly. Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. And then I will let you go.
Well,
Yep.
thank
Thank
you
you
all for
everyone
being
for
here,
coming.
you guys. I'll stay on with Zainab. If you want to stay back and ask questions. But if not, just know that, this black man, loves all of you. You're my sisters and brothers. And whatever I can do to continue to support you all, and Sister Zainab and GPS, you can count on me to do that. So again, thank you for listening, and thank you for, indulging in this opportunity with me. For sure.
Thank you so much. Someone sent me a message directly. Let me see if that's, oh, she's just saying thank you for the presentation.
Of course. Of
Yeah.
course. No problem.
Thank you, Vivian.
Yeah. Well, you guys take care and enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend.
Oh, you too. Thank you so much once again. So this was amazing as always. Yeah, thank you. And
Yeah.
I will be in touch with you as well. Thank you guys so much for coming. Have a wonderful night.